For the next 7 days, I want you to talk to yourself, not as a critic, not as a doubter, but as your own best coach. Why? Because the way you talk to yourself literally changes the structure and chemistry of your brain. Every time you say something to yourself, whether out loud or in your thoughts, you're wiring and reinforcing neural circuits. So the question is, are you wiring circuits for strength or for self-sabotage? Here's the deal. Your brain listens to everything you say. When you say, I can't do this, your brain prepares for failure. When you say, I'm learning how to do this, your brain literally starts mapping out new strategies. For 7 days, I challenge you to talk to yourself like this. I'm capable of more than I think. Discomfort is where growth lives. Mistakes are data, not identity. I don't need motivation, I need movement. One small win today will build the person I want to be. I've done hard things before, I can do them again. Say it in the mirror, say it during your workout, say it while you're struggling. These aren't affirmations, they're commands to your nervous system. Remember, your mind follows your body, and your body follows your breath and your language. So speak like someone who's building resilience. Speak like someone who's rewiring their brain for focus, discipline, and growth. 7 days, that's all it takes to start shifting your baseline. Not overnight, but definitely over time. Speak like it matters, because it does. You talk to yourself more than anyone else talks to you. The conversation never stops. So the question isn't if you're speaking to yourself. The question is how you're doing it, and what kind of biology you're building with it. Your nervous system doesn't care if something is true or false. It cares whether it's repeated. What you say again and again, it treats as real. Your identity starts with repetition. So if you say, I'm lazy, I'm always anxious, I can't focus, you're creating a sensory map where that becomes the default behavior. Not because it's your nature, but because your neurons are efficient. They don't judge, they just wire. So if you want to rewire, start with pattern disruption. Start saying things that are unfamiliar but useful. Your brain resists it at first, not because it's wrong, but because it's unfamiliar. Familiarity isn't proof, it's just habit, and habit isn't destiny, it's plastic. This is the power of talking to yourself with intent. You direct your own neuroplasticity. The way you narrate your effort, your identity, your obstacles, it shapes what your brain believes is worth changing. This is not placebo, this is biology. When you wake up and you feel that low-level friction, that resistance to action, that's your brain trying to conserve energy. But when you say, I get to choose discomfort right now, you're engaging the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. That region tracks error and effort. If you talk to it with clarity, it responds with forward movement. If you talk to it with doubt, it triggers avoidance. 7 days, that's the time horizon. It's not about massive transformation. It's about directional shift, about training your internal voice to serve action, not emotion. Your feelings are real, but they are not reliable signals for what you should do. Action is the signal. You say, I'm tired. Fine, but follow it with, and I move anyway. You say, this feels overwhelming. Okay. Then add, and I can break it down into the next step. These phrases matter. They reduce limbic noise and increase cortical control. You're not lying to yourself. You're leading yourself. When you're under stress, your brain starts narrowing. The limbic system wants you to escape or fight. But when you speak clearly, calmly, and with intention, you create internal space. You shift blood flow to regions that allow decision, making, planning, execution. The phrase, I've done hard things before, is not fluff, it's a retrieval cue. It pulls on memory networks tied to effort and resilience. It reminds your hippocampus that difficulty isn't new and survival isn't at stake. It makes the present problem feel navigable. Talk to yourself in motion, during a workout, during a cold shower, during a hard decision. That's when the circuits are most pliable. Movement enhances neurochemical priming. Words spoken during effort get stamped more deeply than words spoken in rest. So speak then, say it when it burns. This is where strength is built. Say it when you don't want to keep going. This rep matters. Say it when you want to quit early. One more gives me the edge. These statements aren't motivational. They're biochemical instructions. Your breath will follow, your posture will shift, your brainstem will take cues, and you'll begin training your autonomic nervous system to normalize hard things. That's the real win, not just doing the thing, but making it easier to do hard things in the future. Every day has friction points, transitions, gaps between intention and action. When you hit them, don't rely on motivation. Use your voice, out loud if needed, whispered if not, but with clarity. This is the pivot. Now is when I decide. The next 5 minutes matter. Those small statements reduce ambiguity. They give the brain a foothold. And the brain loves clarity, especially in stress. Unclear goals lead to avoidance. Precise language drives behavior. Be surgical with your words. Be sharp. Be deliberate. 7 days of this will start changing your baseline. The first 3 days, you'll notice resistance. That's normal. Your old patterns are entrenched. They're efficient, even if they're unhelpful, but efficiency can be overwritten with consistency. Say it anyway. By day 4, you'll feel less internal negotiation, less emotional drag, more clarity, more bias toward action. That's not a placebo. That's a shift in neuromodulators. You're priming dopamine earlier. You're triggering norepinephrine with intent. You're running your system on signals, not stories. By day 6, your voice starts sounding different. It's no longer a performance. It's you. Your identity is catching up to your behavior. Because identity is not what you think of yourself in abstract. It's the average of your decisions narrated. You say, I am focused, and then you act like it. That becomes who you are, not in some mystical way, in a literal biological sense. Neural pathways reflect behavioral truth, not emotional noise. Don't aim for positivity, aim for precision. Don't say everything's fine if it's not. Say it's hard right now and I'm finding a way forward. That's not denial. That's agency, and agency is a chemical cocktail of dopamine, acetylcholine, and forward tilt. If you mess up, good, use it. Say, that's data. Say, that mistake teaches me faster. This flips the learning circuits on. The basal ganglia loves error-based learning, but only if the framing is constructive. If the narrative is shame, the learning stops. What you want is adaptive error, which means failure with feedback followed by action. That only happens if the voice in your head knows how to speak the language of growth. So practice it, script it if needed, rehearse it like reps. Here's how I show up today. Here's what I do when it gets hard. Here's what I say when I want to quit. Repeat it until it becomes automatic. Not robotic, embodied. You are literally becoming the voice you repeat. You are shaping circuits with words, words backed by breath, breath backed by choice, choice backed by biology. You say it before you believe it, not because you're pretending, but because belief follows behavior. You earn belief by acting, and you act best when your internal language serves the direction you want to move. So say it again. Say it like it matters. Say it in tension. Say it in action. 7 days. Not to become someone new, but to remember that you're the one who decides what story gets airtime. And your nervous system, it's listening every time, every word. Keep your voice steady when things shake around you. That's when it counts most, when the variables rise, stress, pressure, fatigue. That's when your inner voice becomes either your weapon or your weight. The nervous system is always scanning for safety or threat. If you speak threat, it prepares to flee or freeze. If you speak clarity and commitment, it prepares to act. This is real-time brain-body coordination, governed not by feelings, but by the language you choose under pressure. Talk to yourself like a leader, especially when you feel like a follower. I know what I'm doing next. This is the priority. The next 10 minutes matter more than the last 10 hours. Those aren't motivational slogans, they're neural directives. Your brain prefers known paths, so build them, speak them into being over and over until they become default under stress. You don't need to feel confident to sound clear. You don't need to feel fearless to move forward. Emotions are transient, directives are structural. When your voice gets specific, your brain gets focused. When your language is vague, the system scans for distraction. Say what matters, eliminate filler. Don't narrate what you're afraid of, direct what you intend to do. The best performers, under load in chaos, have one thing in common: clean internal language, not loud, not aggressive, just simple, clear, and useful. Breathe, lock in, next move. They don't ask how they feel, they tell themselves what's next. That is the power of directed cognition. This is why day 5 or 6 of talking to yourself like this feels different. The loops change. Instead of circling uncertainty, you start closing loops faster. Instead of spiraling in what if, you build patterns of what now. Your executive brain begins to take the wheel more often. The chatter quiets not because it's gone, but because it's no longer in charge. You're not building hype, you're building access to action when it matters most, access to calm under load, access to discipline without drama. This is not about being robotic, it's about becoming fluent in self-direction. Language creates proximity. What you say to yourself pulls a concept closer or pushes it further away. Say, "I always mess up," and you hardwire that as identity. Say, "I missed that cue, next one coming," and you turn a failure into a transition point. The difference is one breath, one sentence, one cue. In moments of fatigue, speak shorter. Directives work better than explanations when you're tired. Stand up, next step, move, keep it primal, keep it punchy. Your brainstem doesn't need context. It needs action. Later, reflect. In the moment, command. One of the most effective things you can say to yourself under stress is this: "This is useful." That phrase alone turns your appraisal system toward growth. It recruits neurochemistry differently. Stress stops being noise and becomes signal. The stressor is no longer something to escape. It becomes a chance to practice control. That single mental pivot, repeated, is transformative. There is no perfect way to do this. You'll have days where the internal voice goes dark, where old stories creep back in, where you say things that sabotage you. That's part of rewiring. What matters isn't perfection, it's the return. Catch it early, interrupt it, replace it. That's the work, not one day, every day. Every time you speak a better thought, even if it feels fake, you strengthen a new loop. Even if it doesn't feel powerful, it's laying down wiring. Internal repetition is more powerful than inspiration. Think of it like reps in the gym. You don't get stronger from the motivational quote on the wall. You get stronger by showing up and lifting, even when it's boring. Your nervous system is tuned to repetition. The same phrases, delivered again and again in tension, become the new default under pressure. Repetition with effort, that's where the rewiring happens. You're not trying to erase fear or fatigue. You're creating a script that still functions through it. So when doubt rises, say, "I've felt this before, I still act." When your mind wants to stall, say, "Action first, clarity comes later." When you lose momentum, "I return faster now." Those phrases are your neural anchors. Keep them sharp, keep them ready. The system adapts fast. By day 7, what felt forced starts to feel fluent. The phrases fit tighter. The transitions get quicker. You don't win every moment, but you notice the wins stacking. You catch yourself in mid, drift and steer back sooner. That's progress, that's proof, and no, it won't feel explosive. This isn't cinematic, this is biological. Neuroplasticity is subtle while it happens and obvious in retrospect. You look back 2 weeks later and realize your reactions changed, your tone changed, your posture under stress changed. That is the real signal. You can train emotional resilience without ever reading a book on it. You can train discipline without ever needing more motivation. You can build all of it with a simple rule. Talk to yourself the way someone would if they were coaching you to win under pressure. Because that's what you are. You are your own coach, your own commander, your own director in every high-stakes moment of your life. When you walk into a task that's overwhelming, don't describe the overwhelm. Describe the next action, open the file, start the first sentence, move for 5 minutes. These commands activate systems that don't rely on willpower, they rely on instruction. You are not stuck. You are under-instructed. The mind wants to conserve, it wants to hesitate, it wants to delay just long enough to keep you comfortable. But comfort is not the goal, clarity is. If you're clear enough, you'll move. If you speak with enough intent, the resistance loses leverage. Hard days are training days. On days when your energy is low, your voice becomes even more critical. Speak like an operator, fewer words, more function. Remind yourself, energy is low, discipline is on. That phrase alone can shift the chemistry of the moment. And if nothing else works, reduce it to this: I move anyway. That's the golden phrase. No matter how foggy, how tired, how frustrated, I move anyway. That phrase bypasses the limbic drama. It puts one foot forward. It makes the next moment winnable. Eventually, this becomes part of your physiology. The voice becomes automatic. It shows up when you need it, not just when you script it, but to get there, you practice every morning, every workout, every deadline, every difficult conversation, and over time, the story you tell yourself isn't fiction, it's function. It works, not because it's magic, but because it's wired. That's what 7 days of neural repetition creates, the beginning of a self-directed brain. The structure of who you are is hidden in how you speak to yourself when no one's listening. That's where the real blueprint lives, not in the highlight moments, but in the quiet tension, when the alarm goes off and you hesitate, when the distraction tempts and you pause. That's when the internal voice either gives permission to drift or commands you back to course. And it's always there, either automated by habit or shaped by intention. When you say, get up, don't negotiate, that's not just mental toughness, it's neural prioritization. Your prefrontal cortex gets the cue, execute. Delay dissipates, dopamine shifts from fantasy to movement. That single sentence becomes a neurochemical switch. You can use it as often as needed. Consistency is more important than variety. You don't need new lines every day. You need the right ones, repeated until they're automatic. Athletes don't change their warm-up every morning. Operators don't invent new rituals mid-mission. Precision beats novelty. Use the same phrases until they become embedded. Stand tall, breathe slow, next rep. These become anchors, so when the chaos comes, you don't search for direction. It's already programmed. This is how elite focus gets built, not through motivation, but through neural pruning. Every time you redirect yourself, every time you interrupt, drift, and return to task, you're trimming away the noise and strengthening the signal. You're not just improving productivity, you're optimizing signal-to-noise ratio in your nervous system. That's real focus. That's what peak performance is grounded in. You won't always feel like it's working. That's the illusion of growth. The circuits being reshaped don't light up with fanfare. They grind. They struggle. And then, one day, a task that once took force feels fluent. You react faster. You pause less. You self-correct earlier. That's how you know it's working. This is the hard truth most people miss. Your brain doesn't care if the voice in your head is kind or cruel. It cares whether it's effective. So if your inner voice is aggressive but unclear, it's useless. If it's gentle but weak, it's ineffective. What it needs to be is directive. Speak with aim, even if it's quiet. Even if it's simple, speak with intent. You can train this in micro moments. When you reach for your phone unconsciously, interrupt with, pause, why? When you open a browser tab out of boredom, say, this isn't the move. When you sit down to work, don't just hope for focus, trigger it. Lock in, 10 minutes, let's go. These mini cues build macro, behavior, self. Direction becomes a reflex. Fatigue doesn't mean stop. Fatigue means simplify, reduce the sentence, lower the word count, make it sharper. When willpower fades, clarity has to rise. 1 more minute. Do the thing. Breathe through this. These short bursts of language can carry you through long stretches of resistance. You will have setbacks. That's the reality of rewiring. Some days the old loops win, the distraction hits, the doubt creeps in. You'll catch yourself 3 hours later wondering where your focus went. That's okay. The win isn't in never falling. It's in reducing recovery time. Say, back on. Say, refocus now. Train the voice to be the reset button, not the critic. Too many people narrate their limitations. I always get distracted. I never finish things. I'm bad at mornings. That language isn't honest, it's programming. The repetition makes it real. You have to replace those loops, not with fake positivity, but with functional identity. Say, I'm building focus. I'm training consistency. I get sharper under stress. These aren't affirmations, they're behavioral scripts. You speak them, then prove them with microaction. Your nervous system won't believe it instantly, but if you act congruently enough times, it becomes the new baseline. There's a part of your brain, the anterior cingulate, that tracks errors and conflict. Every time you say, this is the hard part, and then you lean in instead of pulling back, you're teaching it that stress is part of mastery. That region starts calming down during pressure instead of sounding the alarm. That's neuroadaptation through language. You're not faking confidence. You're rehearsing calm. There's no moment too small to practice. Waiting in line, patience is training. Running late, move fast, stay calm. Want to scroll endlessly. Not the priority. This is where mental strength is built, not in perfect conditions, but in ordinary friction. Language doesn't just narrate behavior, it can initiate it. That's the real shift. You stop waiting to feel ready, and you start acting as if you already are. Let's begin. I move now. 1 page, 3 reps. The behavior becomes your identity. The voice becomes the driver. Some days, the voice will feel silent, empty. You'll want to listen to music, noise, distraction. Anything to avoid silence. That's a sign you're resisting the internal dialogue, so lean in, ask a question. What am I avoiding? Follow it up. What's the next move? When you practice listening instead of escaping, the internal voice gets clearer. You become more fluent with yourself. On day 7, something shifts. It's not loud, but it's real. You notice that you start speaking to yourself before the task, not after it begins. The voice leads instead of reacting. That's the milestone. That's when you know you've crossed from passive narration to active direction. This is what changes high performers from hopeful strugglers. They don't wait to feel like doing the thing. They script the next thing. They decide the next behavior, then act, then narrate. That loop, run over and over again, becomes automatic. It becomes execution. The good news is, it's available to anyone. There's no talent gap in internal language, only practice and awareness. No one's born with a perfect script. They build it, you build it. 7 days is a foundation, not a finish line, but it's enough to notice momentum. Let it be awkward at first, let it feel forced. That's what learning sounds like, but speak anyway, write it down if needed. Rehearse it during calm so it shows up under pressure. Use your own words. Keep them tight. Speak as if the next 10 seconds matter, because they do. Every time you choose language over impulse, clarity over drift, direction over doubt, you earn self-respect. You build proof, not for others, for yourself. You start to believe in your own pattern, and that belief isn't just felt. It's installed, one directive at a time. You don't need to feel fearless. You need to feel capable, and capability is trained. It's not a trait, it's not a mood, it's a system, and that system is shaped by repetition, especially the words you repeat when no one is watching. So continue. You're not just rewiring your brain, you're leading it. Keep speaking through resistance. When your mind says stop, slow down, avoid, that's your cue to lean in with command, not aggression, precision. I keep going. One more unit of effort. No emotion, just execution. Your brain listens most closely when it's on edge. That's when neuroplasticity is highest. When discomfort rises, the nervous system looks for leadership. If your voice offers clarity, it follows. If it offers chaos, it loops. That's how patterns persist, not because they're good, but because they're repeated. You don't need to erase the old voice. You need to volume it with better instruction, not louder, just clearer. If the old voice says, this is too much, you answer, break it down. If it says, I can't, you answer, I will try the next step. This isn't lying to yourself. This is layering. You're not erasing what you felt. You're overriding what you no longer want to serve. Train in the margins, the transition from rest to movement, the pause before the next set, the moment between inhale and exhale. Speak in those moments, because that's when old patterns creep in unnoticed. The default voice thrives in silence. Fill that gap with structure. Now I engage. Reset. Full attention. You're not talking to be dramatic. You're building a lattice to climb, thought by thought, breath by breath. This is where control begins, not in the chaos of the external, but in the frame you create internally. You can feel overwhelmed and still be directive. You can be exhausted and still give yourself the next clear cue. That's what separates peak states from survival mode, not energy levels, but language quality. If you say, "This is what I do when it's hard," your physiology aligns. Your breath rate adjusts, posture corrects. Cortisol doesn't vanish, but it doesn't dominate. You aren't suppressing emotion, you're guiding it. That's a learned skill. That's the real mental edge, not absence of stress, but response to it. You will want to give up sometimes. That's part of growth. Don't waste time resisting the thought. Acknowledge it, then override it. I want to stop, but I don't. This is the test. Quitting is louder than effort. Lower the noise. These phrases might seem artificial at first. They're not. They're scaffolding for new reflexes. When your self-talk is designed with intent, even failure becomes structured. You miss a mark. What do you say? That was feedback. Adjust course. One step smarter now. This framing doesn't remove accountability. It sharpens it. Because you're still showing up, still refining, still instructing. This is how you remove emotion from evaluation. You move from self-judgment to self-instruction, from "I suck at this" to "what needs adjustment," from "I blew it again" to "I recognize that pattern. Let's intercept next time." That shift in voice changes your loop from spiral to solution. 7 days of this style of self-talk can begin altering baseline behavior, not because it's a magical time window, but because 7 days is enough to feel the resistance, override it, and feel the reward. That reward isn't dopamine alone. It's proof, evidence that you are not your past narration. You're the author, and you just started a new chapter. Talk to yourself like you're training for precision, not for comfort. This is the rep that counts. Right now matters most. Let's build signal, not noise. You're not chasing hype. You're building a rhythm. Rhythm reduces doubt. Doubt thrives in the unknown. Language makes things known. Even small tasks deserve directed language. Folding clothes, one thing, done well. Cleaning up, handle the environment, sharpen the mind. Finishing an email, complete it with clarity. These aren't overstatements, they're integrations. Every time you align task with talk, you build coherence. Coherence is power. When you hit fatigue, say less, but say sharper. Go. Now. Again. Your brain under load needs economy. You're not trying to inspire. It's too late for that. You're trying to command. Use utility over emotion. Simple, actionable cues. The words don't need beauty. They need bite. Talk to yourself in movement. On a run, cadence, breathe, push. During reps, drive, hold, control. Before a difficult call, calm, facts, listen. These commands reduce cognitive clutter. The brain wants fewer decisions under pressure. Give it clarity, reduce optionality, make the next behavior obvious. When you're anxious, don't talk about the anxiety. Name the behavior, sit down and write, focus on breath, step into the call. Action-oriented commands displace ambiguous emotion, not because feelings aren't valid, but because direction is more useful when it's time to move. Most people live their whole lives with a default internal narrator, untrained, reactive, built on old feedback loops. The good news is this: it's not permanent. Neuroplasticity doesn't care about age, it cares about repetition. What you say often, especially under tension, becomes truth to the nervous system, so you don't have to believe it at first. You have to speak it, act on it, then prove it. When your effort dips, increase your clarity. Ask, what am I doing right now? Follow it up. What matters next? If you can answer those two questions, your internal voice is working. If you can't, go silent, breathe, and speak again only when you're clear. Internal silence is better than noisy doubt. If the day derails, don't collapse into guilt. Speak a pivot. We start again, back on track. Next action now. Guilt is an unproductive narrator. Direction is recovery. The faster you return to instruction, the faster your biology follows. That's not soft, it's efficient. Train this with time constraints. Give yourself 5 minutes. Say, 5 minutes, full control. At the end, reset. Do it again. Repetition builds reliability. The goal isn't to feel like a machine. It's to operate with enough clarity that emotion no longer stalls action. By the end of day 7, you'll begin to notice less internal friction. Not because life got easier, but because your internal leadership improved. When the voice in your head becomes a teammate instead of a tyrant, everything accelerates, tasks move faster, recovery gets quicker. Focus lasts longer, confidence grows, not from results, but from the pattern of self-respect that comes from speaking, acting, and proving in alignment. You'll feel the shift when hesitation loses its grip. When your first impulse is action, not avoidance, when the task gets hard and instead of spiraling, you simplify, that's when you know the voice changed, you rewired the loop. It's still early, but it's real. And you keep going, not because you're chasing perfection, but because you've seen what happens when language is designed not to fault. You speak now not to cope, but to command. Speak when it's hardest to speak. That's when the architecture of the mind is either reinforced or redesigned. If you only speak with clarity when conditions are smooth, you're not leading your system, you're just narrating it. The challenge is to keep language sharp when chaos grows. Because that's when the system is listening most, that's when the nervous system is pliable. You're not trying to survive the moment, you're trying to structure the future, tell yourself exactly what to do. Not how you feel, not why it's hard, just what's next, stand up, move forward, finish the cycle. The brain thrives under direction, especially short, specific commands. Emotion rises, clarity must rise higher. This is where internal discipline separates from motivation. Discipline starts with language. It's not about positivity. It's not about hyping yourself up. It's about frictionless execution. You reduce noise by increasing cue clarity. Cue should be so direct that your body follows before your emotion catches up. Walk, write, breathe slow. You don't need philosophy, you need precision. This internal dialogue becomes muscle memory. You start recognizing patterns not from theory but from repetition. You notice the early cues of distraction. You catch the rise of hesitation before it fully forms. And instead of spiraling, you insert a line, no drift, lock in. That's the power of micro-language. It's fast enough to interrupt and clear enough to execute. You don't get this from reading, you get it from loops, loops of effort, resistance, direction, execution, over and over, in reps, in writing, in quiet moments before the next push. That's how the mind gets trained to obey purpose over preference. You will still feel resistance, but it won't scare you, because the voice is already prepared. You'll have heard it before. This is the part that makes me stronger. This is where I grow. Keep form, no drop. When that voice is practiced, resistance becomes familiar, and familiarity reduces fear. Even in failure, there's structure. You try, you miss. What's the script? Note the miss, reset posture, try again. You don't collapse into emotion. You tighten into focus. Because repetition doesn't only teach your brain, it teaches your voice how to respond under load. Remember, language is leverage. The right words don't just describe effort. They create it. They shift blood flow. They shape motor action. They guide hormonal responses. Words aren't ideas. They're commands to the system. So treat them like tools. Sharpen them. Keep them close. You can train it like you train the body. Set a 5-minute timer. During those 5 minutes, only 2 types of thoughts are allowed: direct instruction and focused observation. Breathe steady, keep pace, observe posture. Everything else gets interrupted. You do that a few times a day. not because 5 minutes changes everything, but because it's a test lab, a controlled arena to refine your inner voice. That lab becomes real life. You bring that trained voice into the day, into the commute, the conversation, the gym, the workspace. You notice the shift, the pause before saying something reactive, the breath before an impulsive choice. You override it with cue, wait, reroute, execute properly. That's not maturity, it's mental training. When you wake up and don't want to move, don't argue with yourself. Give the command, feet on floor, stand up straight, light on, then let the body follow. Once you've moved, the motivation follows. Movement is a higher priority than mood. That's the biological truth, and internal language is how you trigger that movement. You'll notice something by day 10. The delay between discomfort and action shortens. That's not just willpower, it's the result of trained internal cueing. The voice has rehearsed the next action so many times, it skips negotiation. And that's the power of this method. It removes negotiation. You don't want your internal dialogue to be a courtroom. You want it to be a launchpad, not arguments, just commands, clear, timed, executable. That's how you remove the friction of should I, and replace it with now I do. This doesn't mean suppressing emotion. It means organizing it. There's a place for doubt, but not during execution. There's space for reflection, but not during movement. Your voice needs to differentiate zones. We reflect later. Right now, we move. That separation builds psychological boundaries. Boundaries reduce cognitive leakage. You preserve energy for the task. There's a phrase, the body obeys the voice it hears most. That includes your own. If your self-talk is consistently uncertain, scattered, passive, you teach your nervous system to hesitate. If your self-talk is concise, consistent, and directive, you train readiness. This isn't spiritual, it's neural. The more clearly you direct yourself, the less energy you waste on interpretation. The brain wants certainty, not noise. Noise creates hesitation, certainty creates flow. Flow isn't mystical, it's mechanical. It's when systems are aligned, cue, action, reinforcement, looped cleanly. You'll begin to notice even your body responds differently when the language is trained. Shoulders align, breathing slows, vision narrows. These aren't decisions. They're physiological responses to self-command. You say, engage, and the body engages, not always perfectly, but increasingly consistently. That's the signal of integration. Some people try to borrow language from others. It works at first, but long-term, your own nervous system responds best to your words. So pay attention to what phrases hit hardest. What actually moves you, use those, repeat them. That repetition builds personal code, and code beats quotes every time. You will face temptation, to scroll, to drift, to delay. The voice needs to be ready. That's a trap. Back to task. Eyes forward. Not dramatic, just directive. That interruption, repeated enough times, changes neural preference. Distraction starts to feel unnatural. Focus becomes the path of least resistance. That's real change. When others are losing pace, your language becomes an anchor. Stay in rhythm. They slow. I don't. Keep execution tight. You're not trying to dominate them. You're trying to protect your standard. That's leadership. Quiet, internal, repeatable. By the time day 14 hits, you've spoken hundreds of cues to yourself, most of them in private, and that's the point. Internal strength is invisible, but it shows up in how quickly you return to form, how steady you stay when things go sideways, how direct your action is when others freeze. That's the value of this work. You've built a system that turns thoughts into actions without delay, not perfectly, not without setback, but with less friction and more control, and now the job is to continue. You don't change the method, you change the depth. You go from simple cues to layered sequences, from start now to start, execute, review, adjust, from voice to system. And when doubt returns, and it will, you'll already know the line, this voice is trained, follow it.